before the cold, before the briefcase, before any of it changed, there was just a girl standing in the rain outside Tim Hortons, counting change in her palm. Her name was Wren Calloway. Not the Wren Calloway who would appear in national headlines 8 months later. Not the Wren Calloway whose name was quietly carved into the cornerstone of a legal aid foundation in downtown Vancouver. Just Wren, 41 years old, wearing a waterproof jacket that had seen too many winters, hair pulled back under a knitted toque her late mother had made her 20 years ago. She had $4.75 in her hand. A double-double cost $2.19. She was calculating whether she could also afford a muffin. She decided she could not. She pushed through the door anyway, just to get out of the rain. That was the morning everything started. The Tim Hortons on Hastings Street in Vancouver wasn't the kind of place people lingered. It was the kind of place people ducked into. Construction workers at 5 a.m., nurses coming off night shifts, students who couldn't afford the cafe 2 blocks east with the exposed brick and the oat milk options. Wren had been coming here for 3 weeks, ever since she'd taken on a short-term consulting contract at a non-profit 2 streets over. She always ordered the same thing. She always sat in the back left corner, near the outlet, with her laptop open. Nobody looked twice at her. That was the thing about Wren Calloway. She had spent the better part of a decade learning how to disappear. It wasn't difficult. A plain jacket, no jewelry except her late mother's wedding band, worn on her right hand out of old habit. Sensible boots with a slight heel, scuffed at the toe. She didn't carry a designer bag. She didn't drive a car that announced anything. She took the bus, same as everyone else, and she sat near the window, and she watched the city go by. Most people assumed she was a social worker, or maybe a school teacher, someone who worked in the public sector and had made peace with it. Nobody guessed the truth. Nobody ever did. And that was, Wren had always believed, exactly the point. She was at her corner table when it happened. The doors swung open and a woman rushed in. Late 20s, impeccably dressed, a silk blouse under a blazer that cost more than most people's rent, her dark hair blown sideways by the wind. She was already speaking into her phone, not looking where she was going, and the leather tote hanging from her elbow clipped the edge of a chair and swung wide. The contents scattered across the floor with a sound like someone had dropped a tray. Wren was already out of her seat. "Oh, God," the woman started. "It's all right." Wren crouched down, a planner, a lip balm, a silver pen, a folded document of some kind, the edges already getting damp from the wet floor, and a slim black wallet which had slid almost to the counter. Wren picked everything up and placed it on the table nearest to the woman, quickly but carefully, the way you'd handle something that mattered even if you didn't know its owner. The woman barely looked at her. She was still on the phone. Something about a board meeting, a 9 a.m., someone named Sterling who hadn't confirmed. She scooped up her things with one arm, said thanks in the flat, distracted way people thank automated doors, and walked back out into the rain. Wren sat back down. Her coffee was still warm. She opened her laptop and didn't think about it again. Not until she noticed, 20 minutes later, the slim black wallet still sitting on the table by the door. She stood over it for a moment. Around her, the morning rush moved. Someone was ordering in Cantonese. The espresso machine hissed. A child in a stroller dropped a Timbit and screamed about it. Wren picked up the wallet. She didn't open it immediately. That felt like a violation of something, though she couldn't have said what exactly. She just held it, slim, expensive, the leather, the kind's been broken in rather than bought that way. Then she opened it. There was a driver's license. The name read Claudette Beaumont Voss. An address in West Vancouver. A stack of bills that Wren didn't count but understood immediately to be significant. Several cards. And tucked behind the cards, a photograph, worn at the edges, soft with age, of 2 girls in a backyard somewhere, squinting into summer sun, holding up fish they'd clearly just caught. One of them was maybe 16. The other was younger. They were both laughing. Wren looked at the photograph for a long moment. She closed the wallet. She had a 9 a.m. meeting of her own, a 30-minute bus ride, a full day of work ahead. The rain outside had not stopped. Nobody would know. That was the thought that arrived, unbidden, the way those thoughts always do, the ones that reveal something about who you actually are. Nobody would know. The woman hadn't seen Wren's face. She hadn't asked for her name. The wallet could have been lost before she even walked in. Wren could sit back down, finish her coffee, walk out the door, and that would be the end of it. She put the wallet in her jacket pocket. She flagged down the person behind the counter, a young man named Arjun, according to his name tag, and asked if he'd seen which direction the woman in the blazer had gone. He pointed left. Wren walked out into the rain. Claudette Beaumont-Voss was not difficult to find, in the end. She was standing half a block down, still on her phone, waiting for a rideshare that hadn't arrived yet. She looked up when Wren approached, and her expression did what expressions often do in that situation. A flicker of wariness, of trying to figure out what this stranger wanted. "You left this," Wren said, and held out the wallet. Claudette stared at it. Something moved across her face, not just relief, but something older and more complicated. She reached out and took it, and when she opened it and saw the photograph still there, tucked exactly where she'd left it, she exhaled a sound that wasn't quite a word. "My sister," she said, quietly, to no one in particular. Then she looked up at Wren properly, maybe for the first time. "Thank you," she said, different from before. Not flat, not automated. "I thank you. How much was?" She was already reaching into the wallet. "Nothing," Wren said. "You dropped it. I picked it up." "Please, let me." "I don't need anything," Wren said, and she said it gently, but she said it with the kind of certainty that ends conversations. "Take care of yourself," and she walked back toward the bus stop. That would have been the whole story, if the story had behaved itself. But stories, in Wren Calloway's experience, rarely do. 3 days later, Wren was in a conference room on the 14th floor of an office tower on West Georgia Street. She was sitting across a long glass table from 4 people she'd never met. 2 partners at a development firm, a city planner, and a lawyer named Hargrove, who had the particular energy of someone who expected the meeting to be a formality. The nonprofit Wren had been consulting for was fighting a rezoning. The development firm wanted to demolish a building on the downtown east side that had housed a women's shelter for 19 years. The city planner had already signaled which way his recommendation would go. Hargrove had brought a folder 4 inches thick. Wren had brought a legal pad and a pen. Hargrove hadn't even waited for everyone to sit down before he started. He was the kind of man who wore his confidence like a second blazer. He nodded at Wren, a quick, dismissive nod, and then directed his opening remarks at the 2 partners, as though she weren't in the room. "Given the community benefit assessment and the city's current housing targets," he said, "I think we can agree this is fairly straightforward." Wren wrote something on her legal pad. Then she said quietly, "The community benefit assessment you're referring to, the September report." Hargrove turned to look at her fully for the first time. "That's correct. That report used a methodology that was revised by the Provincial Housing Authority in October. The revised methodology shifts the threshold significantly." She paused. "I have the update here if you'd like to review it." The silence in the room was very specific. It was the silence of someone realizing they'd walked into a room they thought was empty. "You've reviewed the provincial update," Hargrove said. "I wrote part of it," Wren said pleasantly. "I was a senior policy advisor at the Ministry of Housing until 2 years ago. Before that, I spent 6 years as a housing rights litigator." She set the legal pad down. "I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself properly at the start. I'm Wren Calloway. I'm here on behalf of the East Side Women's Collective." One of the partners glanced at Hargrove. Hargrove looked at Wren the way people look at a door that has turned out to be a wall. The meeting went on for 2 hours. At the end of it, the development proposal was referred back for a full environmental and community impact review, which, in the language of municipal planning, meant it was dead. Wren didn't think about Claudette Beaumont-Voss again until the following Tuesday. She was back at the Tim Hortons on Hastings, back corner, outlet, double-double, laptop, when the door opened and Claudette walked in, different from the last time. No blazer, dark jeans, a cashmere sweater, hair down. She was looking around the cafe with the expression of someone who's been searching. When she found Wren, she stopped. Then she walked over. "I didn't think you'd be here," Claudette said. "I've come by twice. I was starting to think I'd imagined you." Wren looked up from her screen. "I come most mornings." Claudette sat down across from her, without being invited, which was a thing Wren had noticed, that people with money often did, not out of rudeness exactly, but out of an unconscious certainty that spaces would accommodate them. "I asked the guy at the counter. He said you usually sit here. Arjun, is that his name?" She looked briefly embarrassed. "I should know that. I've been coming here for 4 years." She set her hands flat on the table. I wanted to find you. I wanted to thank you properly. Not like the other day. You thanked me. I was on the phone. I barely looked at you. She paused. My sister died 8 months ago. That photograph, it's the only one I have of us together where we're both actually happy, where it was just us. Her voice was steady, but only technically. I would've. If I'd lost that, I don't know. Wren was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry about your sister, she said. Claudette nodded. A quick, private nod. Then she seemed to collect herself and looked at Wren properly, the way she hadn't that first morning. Can I ask what you do? You had a laptop. You seemed like you were working, consulting at the moment. Policy work. What kind of policy? Housing, community development, some advocacy. Claudette tilted her head. Beaumont Voss Development, that's my family's firm. The name landed quietly between them. Wren waited. Claudette's expression shifted, working something out. The rezoning on Kiefer Street, the one that got referred back last week. She said it slowly. That was you. I was in the room, Wren said. My brother runs the firm now. I walked away from it 5 years ago. Something in her voice made it sound like that sentence had been said many times in many ways and never quite gotten easier. I started my own practice. Real estate law, but different, tenant rights mostly. It's not. She stopped. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Wren thought she might know, but she said nothing. I just wanted to say thank you, Claudette said again. Genuinely, that wallet had everything in it, my cards, my cash, and you gave all of it back. You didn't take anything. Of course not, Wren said. You'd be surprised, Claudette said, and there was something tired in it. They talked for 40 minutes. About the neighborhood, how it had changed, how it was still changing, the particular brutality of watching a city price out the people who built it, about the shelter on Kiefer Street and what it actually meant to the women who used it, beyond what any community benefit assessment could quantify, about Claudette's sister, briefly, in the gentle circling way people talk about recent loss, about the photograph, how they'd been fishing at their grandparents' property in the Okanagan, how her sister had insisted on throwing her fish back even though they'd been planning to eat it, how Claudette had been furious at the time and could not now imagine any other version of that afternoon. Wren listened more than she spoke. She had always been better at listening. At some point, Claudette asked where Wren had grown up. Winnipeg, Wren said. Before that, a small town north of Kenora. My dad worked the railway. My mum taught elementary school. She paused. Not a complicated origin story. You ended up a housing policy expert in Vancouver. You ended up a tenant rights lawyer when your family owns a development firm, Wren said mildly. Claudette smiled. It was the first real smile Wren had seen from her. Fair point. It was Arjun who, 2 days later, handed Wren an envelope with her name on it. The woman in the cashmere sweater, he said. She left it yesterday. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy cream paper. The handwriting was small and careful. Miss Calloway, I looked you up. I hope that's not strange. I know who you are now, and I think I understand why you didn't say. There is a case I've been trying to build for 6 months, involving a property management company that has been systematically evicting low-income tenants across 3 buildings in East Van. I have the tenants. I have the documentation. What I don't have is someone who knows how to move this through the policy channels before the winter rental freeze ends. If you have any interest, I would value your time. CBV Wren read it twice. Then she folded it and put it in her jacket pocket, next to where the wallet had been. There were things Claudette Beaumont Voss did not yet know about Wren Calloway. She didn't know that before the consulting contracts and the Ministry of Housing and the 6 years of litigation, Wren had spent 4 years as a senior legal counsel at the federal level, working on housing policy that eventually became 2 pieces of national legislation. She didn't know that the quiet period, the consulting, the non-profit work, the double-doubles at Tim Hortons, was not a step down but a deliberate pause, taken 18 months ago after a diagnosis that turned out to be far less permanent than it had first seemed. She didn't know that Wren sat on 3 boards, all of them quiet, and that 2 of them were the kind of boards where the right conversation at the right moment could redirect the better part of $1 billion in public and private housing investment. She didn't know any of this because Wren hadn't told her. Wren rarely told people. Not because she was secretive, exactly. More because she had discovered a long time ago that who people thought you were shaped every conversation that came after, and that being underestimated, while occasionally frustrating, was also its own kind of freedom. You could sit in the back corner of a Tim Hortons and think clearly. You could walk into a meeting and listen before anyone started performing. You could pick up a wallet off the floor of a coffee shop without anyone reading significance into it. You could just be a person doing the right thing because it was the right thing. Nothing more complicated than that. But here is the part that matters. 3 weeks after that first morning, Wren met with Claudette and the 6 tenants who had been fighting eviction. She sat in Claudette's small office on Commercial Drive, not the kind of office that had an ocean view, the kind that had a space heater and a fern and a whiteboard covered in dates and case numbers. And she listened to each of them talk about what home meant to them. A woman in her 60s named Bernadette, who had lived in her apartment for 22 years and still kept a phone book from 2003 because her late husband's handwriting was in the margins. A single father named Kwame, who had moved 3 times in 4 years and whose daughter had finally settled into a school she loved. A pair of sisters in their 80s who had come to Canada from Portugal in 1974 and wanted to die in the neighborhood they had built their lives in, and said so plainly, with no self-pity, in a way that made the room very still. Wren took notes. That evening, she made 3 phone calls, not to lawyers, not to city councilors, but to people she'd worked with over 15 years who knew where the pressure points were and what it cost to push them. By Friday, the property management company's provincial operating license was under a formal review that had not existed the previous Monday. The evictions were stayed. Claudette called Wren's cell phone at 7:42 p.m. that night. When Wren picked up, there was a pause, the kind that means someone is recalibrating something they thought they understood. "Who are you?" Claudette said. It wasn't accusatory. It was genuinely, a little wonderingly, a question. Wren was standing by her kitchen window, looking out at the North Shore Mountains going purple in the evening light. She thought about all the ways she could answer that. "Someone who picked up your wallet," she said. A short laugh from the other end. Then, "Thank you. I mean it. Those people, Bernadette and Kwame and the sisters, they didn't have anyone who knew how to." A pause. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," Wren said. "Why did you?" She watched the last of the light leave the mountains. "Because Bernadette keeps her husband's handwriting in a phone book," she said. "And that's worth something. That's worth quite a lot, actually." The following spring, Claudette Beaumont-Voss was appointed co-chair of a new provincial housing justice task force. The announcement was quiet, a press release, a few column inches in the Vancouver Sun. Most people hadn't heard of her. Wren had suggested her name. She'd made the call from the back corner of the Tim Hortons on Hastings Street, over a double-double, with her laptop open. Arjun had waved at her when she came in. She'd waved back. On the task force's letterhead, in the fine print at the bottom of the page, there was a list of advisory consultants. Wren's name was there, if you looked for it, halfway down, between a professor from UBC and a former city planner. Most people didn't look that far. She didn't mind. There is something that gets lost in the way we tell stories like this, the part where we make it about rewards, about justice served, about getting what you deserve, as if the only reason to do the right thing is because someone, somewhere, is keeping score. But Wren Calloway didn't walk back out into the rain that Tuesday morning because she thought it would come back to her. She didn't return the wallet because she was hoping for a job offer, or a thank you, or a letter on cream paper. She did it because there was a photograph of 2 sisters laughing in the summer sun, and it belonged to someone who was grieving, and that was all the reason she needed. The rest was just what happened after, and maybe that's the real thing worth sitting with, not the outcome, but the moment before it, the moment when nobody was watching, the moment when keeping the wallet would have been so easy, so quiet, so completely unnoticed, the moment where character is not built, but revealed. If this story stayed with you, if you recognized something in it, something about what it means to do right by a stranger when there's nothing in it for you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment below and tell us, have you ever done something kind when no one was watching? What happened? We read every single one. And if you're new here, welcome to Velvet Honor. We're glad you found us. Hit subscribe and stay a while. There are more stories this one came from, and every one of them is true in the ways that matter most.